Join me on my mission to create a new tomorrow as I chat with industry experts, elite athletes, thought leaders, and government officials about how we activate our vision for a better world. We may agree and we may disagree, but I'm not backing down. I'm Ari Gronich, and this is Create a New Tomorrow podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Create a New Tomorrow. I'm your host, Ari Gronich, and today I have with me Mark Anthony King and Melody Garcia. It is a double feature for y'all. Mark Anthony is a serial entrepreneur, master of storytelling, multimedia persona, and a global leader with a focus on the kingdom of humanitarian impact. His business handlings include a mastery in nutrition, health for optimization of overall wellness and well-being, a practitioner in NLP, strategic interventions, emotional intelligence, etc. His partner Melody is part of the global peace Let's Talk with 35 countries, handling co-leads of Unicef, Unite Orlando, and international multimedia handling. They're about to launch their Soul Script, which is a podcast, media column, and TV show. Is that like a breathful?
Just a pinch. And that was the short form bio.
That was the. I don't know about you, but that excited me.
Excite you? You know, here's the thing. I've been told that I'm going to be in people's pockets so that when anybody asks them what they do for a living, they just pull me out. And here, this is what Ari says. So why don't you guys kind of tell a little bit about yourselves? Mark, I talked to Melody before, so I'm going to let you get started.
Yeah.
Tell a little bit about yourself. Why am I talking to you? What is it that you're doing that's going to help create a new tomorrow? And, let's get going.
All right. So my name is Mark Anthony King. As far as why you're talking to me, you can thank Melody Garcia for putting us into contact. Full disclosure, full transparency, I didn't know the name of the show until right now, and I absolutely love that. You know, we live in an age where, can I be candid, or do I have to be like super politically correct here?
No, there's no political correctness allowed.
Okay, perfect.
No, you're not allowed to censor yourself at all.
All right, so we live in an age where, unfortunately, the leaders and the trailblazers in the world are just horribly narcissistic, and the things that the things that they're doing, and the things that they pride themselves on, and what's important, it's all self-glorification at the end of the day. So you asked what it is that we're doing to make a better tomorrow. Again, speaking truthfully, we have the audacity to put God first and put service to humanity second. And that's an interesting concept for a multitude of reasons, and I'm not going to get into religious discussions or religious debates, but my greatest mentor, Jesus Christ, said that the two things that we should do in this world in order, it's service to God and then service to humanity. And somehow Melody says that, she echoes it best. When you put God first and humanity second, God finds a way of putting you first. I never thought in a million years that I'd be doing the things that I'm doing now. I didn't plan for it. And when it started happening, I asked myself, no disrespect, but are you sure, God, that I'm the right person to be doing this? Because it was never on the plan, and we become so myopic in our desires, and we become so like single-minded and tunnel vision in terms of what it is that we want. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that might not be in alignment with what God wants for us, and when we surrender in that regard, we allow him to place us where he wants us. The impact that we make, it's not self-serving, it's not self-glorifying, it's all to glorify him. And what better way to glorify him than actually doing something to create a better tomorrow, not hypothetically, not conditionally, but literally. And long story short story long at this point, I'm sure, we're now in a position where we're handling and I say this humbly, and I say this with so much gratitude in my heart, the welfare of 36 different nations across the world. And when I say welfare, I'm talking about hygiene products. I'm talking handling internally displaced peoples, orphans, preserving pygmy cultures, teaching children about their rights, teaching women about their rights, women's empowerment, agriculture, bringing in food, bringing in clean water, bringing in infrastructure into incredibly remote areas. These are responsibilities that I don't take lightly. And one of my greatest pleasures, aside from talking about God and how amazing God is, and how amazing that woman is right there on the screen underneath me here, is doing what I can, everything I can. Melody has an amazing prayer that says, God, use all my gifts, talents, and anointings, and maximize everything that you gave me so that I can make the world better and help people, help me help them. Being able to use that platform to talk about what it is that we're doing and who we're helping is become the greatest joy of my life at this point.
Cool. So I'm gonna interrupt you a little bit. So
yeah, please. I was rambling at that point.
You may not know this about me, but I'm a very non-religious person, very spiritual person. I've studied pretty much most of the religions in the world, like at a young age, and so
Yeah.
I was, 9 years old, and I was in Hebrew school from the time I was like 5, and then I started when I was 9 practicing Buddhism. And through Buddhism, I met my girlfriend who lived on a reservation, and I started practicing and studying Indian way and Native way. And from there, I ended up studying Druidism and the Quran, and I kind of just love studying religions in general. But I don't find myself in the same kind of state that you find yourself in, right? As far as like having a specific and direct person that I think I'm speaking to. And so I want to open this up because the things that you're doing are amazing. Some people who are listening to this show are not going to resonate with the words that you're using as far as God, kingdom, king, those kinds of things. They might resonate with the word source. They might resonate with the word universal truth. They might resonate with a lot of other things other than those words. And I don't want them to get turned off to the things that you're doing because of the words that you're using, right? And so I just wanted to emphasize that the things you're doing are amazing. To me, they have nothing to do with anything other than what's in your heart and your soul, not so much a higher being that you're answering to. And so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
The question is serving God, serving humanity itself? Because if we watch or listen to the scriptures that you talk about in the Bible, there's a lot of stuff that says that we are in the likeness of God. So by serving humanity, are we not serving God?
I would say it all depends on the intention, right? Because
Good.
and I used to fall into this category many moons ago where, I wanted to be seen and I wanted to be praised for all the good works that I was doing. So at the end of the day, it wasn't about God and it wasn't about humanity. It was about Mark Anthony King's ego. And that intention is everything. It's relative, but it's everything, so I would say yes, if your intention is pure and not self-glorifying.
Awesome. Melody, you're up.
All right. What did you want me to cover? Everything about me?
Talk about why it is.
I should just let Mark ramble on.
why you're helping to create a new tomorrow today.
Well, so many platforms. We talked about Unicef as one of the handlings. Back in 2016, I decided to go with what is the world's largest children organization that's known, and then recreate that in local Orlando. What was Unicef? We live in a world that keeps basically putting out the message, let's leave a better planet for our children. Let's leave a better planet for our children. Well, let's use some common sense. The planet won't resolve its own problems without better leaders. You know, a lot of the handlings that I have along with Mark as coaches, I'm one of the few certified P&A coaches in the world. What does that mean? Psychoneuroactualization. What does that mean? Maximizing the human potential. The person that certified me in this is Dr. Steve Maraboli, one of the top behavioral scientists in the world, right? And let's pare it down to simplicity here. A lot of adults' root cause problems can be traced back to their childhood. We call it childhood trauma. And a lot of that, from abandonment issues, abuse issues, you name it, that shapes them to who they become in the adult stage. So my genius basically said, well, then let's leave better children for our planet. If I can impact at those young foundations, whatever their social, economic, cultural, whatever status background is, and show them what is love, what is fairness, what is equality, what is not having all these boundaries that's been imposed almost impossibly by the adults, by the environment they live in, then we can be better leaders for tomorrow. So it started with that, you know, and giving sensitivity to your audience, but echoing Mark's sentiments where, again, heart-centered servant leadership, right? Right. I was blessed with the opportunity to not contain it in just representing 190 countries. My journey spoke about the first time I decided to say, use me to help them, not to glorify melody. That very first event brought on impacting and saving over 20,000 lives halfway around the world, which is a lot more than what people can ever dream of in their life collectively. So I decided, okay, well, you know, that was my one all be all, but God had different plan. That was just my beginning. Came Unicef, and then he didn't contain, and the passion, the purpose, once you truly have what Mark has, is a clarity of his purpose and impact. What is his life legacy message? You know, it's not just about words, because as he beautifully puts it, beautiful words aren't always true, and the truth isn't always beautiful, right? And that's a powerful statement to make, lived authentically. It went from, well, didn't stop there. When we tap into the gifts that we have, talents, gifts, anointing, whatever you want to call it, I discovered I have this love of passion for writing. Well, didn't stop there. All of a sudden, that little column became a well-known column in many nations and started winning awards for it. So now I'm a columnist for 3 international magazines that has anywhere from 11 countries to 74 countries reached. But it didn't stop there, right? Comes Global Peace Let's Talk that literally got handed to myself and Mark to now lead 36 countries. The handlings we have are massive.
Right. Can you
that's
please
because the
explain
purpose
what
we
that
have.
is exactly, the Global Peace
Sure.
Talk?
Go
Explain
ahead,
that.
Mark. I'll let Mark lead that, and then I'll add whatever you're missing as far as Global Peace Let's Talk.
So Global Peace Let's Talk is an organization that was founded by somebody who's become a sister, dear friend, mother figure to Melody and myself. She, again, had the courage and the audacity to say yes, and to do something that shouldn't have worked, that seemed far-fetched, that seemed insane at the time. And through sheer determination, through sheer love and compassion, she has created this organization that, as it stands, as of right now, is in 36 different countries. And has, Mel, how many members did we just recently add, like as of not too long ago?
So we just added an additional 35,000 members. What Global Peace Let's Talk, and its early concept, very simple, because the founder is in her 70s in the UK, was just to spread peace. Unknowingly, that intention brought on everything that needed to line up. And in 10 months, Ari, this is just a 10-month-old foundation, nonprofit, 10 months, we're in 36 countries. It's incredible. It's almost unbelievable. And unless you're with us in those meetings, we are meetings with politicians, you know, from different countries. We are in meetings with leaders, entrepreneurs. But what really touches us is when we hear from people on the ground, what they're going through, what the media doesn't cover. This is why Mark and I have the audacity to speak what is true, right? How are we changing a better tomorrow? When we hear people from Cameroon, Africa, being hunted down worse than animals and being slaughtered at that, when we're hearing about children of ground workers saving children that have been violently assaulted, and all they're asking for, Ari, is a piece of paper and crayons so they can continue with art therapy.
Mm-hmm.
This is, art therapy.
A soccer ball so that they can kick it around.
Right.
Yeah.
So what exactly does the foundation do? So
we support this. We support the 17 sustainable goals of the United Nations, which everybody can just Google that part. But then it's not only supporting with message. So for example, to fight famine, we have an agricultural program that literally provides food on the ground. And then not only do that, but also somehow create an entrepreneurship program so that people are sustaining their livelihood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing repeatable, scalable, sustainable infrastructure into these impoverished areas.
Cool. Question.
Mm-hmm.
How much new technology is being used and how much old technology is being used in what you're bringing? So things like for agriculture, how much soil are you teaching or creating soil garden versus hydroponic in warehouse and things like that?
So currently, that is the goal. The goal is bringing technology into the equation, because I always found it curious. We invest so much money into smartphones, right? Smartphones cost over $1,000 today. Technology is growing at such a rapid pace, and as humanity, we're evolving with it in every area of our life except agriculture. Agricultural practices are still like 60 years old, and we're still implementing them today en masse.
Right.
To me, it makes no sense. Why would you allocate so much resources to a phone when you can't eat a phone? Unless you're David Blaine, I'm sure he's eaten a bunch of iPhones in his career, but you can't eat a phone. So the whole goal is eventually to make sure that we are leveraging as much technological advances and applying that to where we're growing food. But currently, we're doing what we're doing in America at this point, where what we're doing now is, though, we have this really big parcel of land that we just acquired. We're going to use that to create an agricultural academy where we physically matriculate students and we teach them how to grow food. We have an on-site, really, really large garden growing, things that grow well in certain parts of Africa, like yucca and sweet potatoes, cabbage, moringa, and again, taking those products and then selling them and using that to create infrastructure within the community, in addition to online academies, because we're looking at opening up these schools in different parts of the world. But right now we're looking at, is it Botswana? No, mm-hmm. Where the first school is going to be open. Yeah.
Botswana.
Yeah.
Botswana, Africa. And then we've also got,
we have a land in Kenya now as well, right?
Yeah, but we've also got Jamaica with their initiatives. Yeah. So, and you talked about agriculture and technology, right? So that's part of one of our contacts in a different country, is helping us bring it to a level where at least we can use modern technology to expedite some of these initiatives. We are actually also creating new programs that bridges gaps instead of that whole stay in your lane message that we talked about. Part of that is creating like a child ambassador program that will connect children around the world, that shows leadership. Remember, I don't know, Ari, did you have some knowledge of old pen pal style where you make friends by writing letters?
I'm an old fogey at this. Grace?
But do you remember when we used to write friends from a different country and how excited we were to get that letter?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, pen pals was a big thing. Nowadays it's, Facebook, WhatsApp. Signal.
But there was so much mystery and just excitement when you get that letter stamped from a different country and they send you pictures. It's recreating that in the newer modern version of child ambassadorships, but we're looking specifically for children that have demonstrated leadership and a global thinking. Right? What does that create? Peace. What does that create? Collaboration over competition.
Culture.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a good friend who has a nonprofit, and it's
Mm-hmm.
called Motivational Missions. They do a lot of child trafficking
Mm-hmm.
work and education, but they also travel to like the worst places on the planet and do talks in
Mm-hmm.
prisons in like South America and stuff like that, Belize and Dominican Republic and all over South America. They do these motivational missions to help with child trafficking. Do you guys, as part of what you do, team up with other nonprofits and other organizations that are doing good, or are you looking for people to just join in on what your thing is?
Now we're actually in collaboration mode, but we are highly vetting any type of partnerships or invitations or collaborations because unfortunately, in my walk with Unicef, right, as well, I've done a lot of call to action against human trafficking and child trafficking and can spit out statistics faster than a lot of people can in just the platform of trafficking, which is again, the silent pandemic.
Statistics.
Oh yeah, well, the statistics are this. It's a $152 billion industry, well-funded, that has over 40 million victims worldwide. Over
And she did say for the viewer, she did say billion with a B.
with a B. And
Yeah.
and child trafficking right now is over 5.4 million children are being trafficked. Right here in Florida, where I live, Florida is the third highest state reported when it comes to trafficking, right? People, and this is just, a sideline educational piece for any adults, parents, aunts, grandmothers, you name it, anybody that has an association with a child. Watch anything that has to do with their social media handlings, from Snapchat to TikTok to Instagram, because a lot of traffickers are masked as predators, masked as other children or teenagers. And people don't think about this, that lures them because there's commonality. Parents, if you have GPS tracking devices on your phone, especially when it comes to Instagram, social media, turn it off. All you're doing is literally giving these people triangulation of your activities. In fact, here's one thing that, because we live in a social media world of posting everything that has to do with your children and everything, I would encourage you to really restrict that and take, what are you promoting? Why are you showing your children all the time? Yes, we love their accomplishments, but you have no idea who's actually looking at your materials.
Yeah.
So
And
more often,
we happen to know personally individuals who have been trafficked by way of Facebook, who found themselves sold into human trafficking because they began chatting with somebody on Facebook, and within a few months, this individual was sold to a pimp.
Yeah, it's amazing the craziness that is happening right out in the open, and the fact that people aren't recognizing what's right in front of their faces is kind of like is very telling. And, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you guys on is because you're actually doing the things that most people are talking about doing, right? So I have this saying, and the saying is, we want to stop gathering to complain and start collaborating to succeed. And collaboration is the main part of that. We want to collaborate for results, right? So how do you guys collaborate? You've been collaborating with governments. I want to get like a picture of what that looks like, so that people who are feeling like that's just too big for them to be able to do, I could never meet with a politician, I could never meet with a government official, right? So they could get an idea that this isn't like a big deal. They're just human beings like us, right?
It's not. So for example, and then I'll let Mark also explain this. For example, my work with UNICEF Unite Orlando, it's an advocacy team, with beautiful and intelligent members and leaders. However, what we start is just knowing. It starts with educating yourself. What are the issues, right? What are the root causes? When we do advocacy, for example, this is my 5th year advocacy. Mark had the honor of actually leading part of the advocacy this year. It literally was meeting with members of the US Congress, right? And humanizing the statistics that they see by story shares. Everybody has a story. That is the one thing that literally ties humanity, is through story shares. But we tell stories. And then with that comes the other platforms that we represent. I'm sure people can tell stories. That's what they call their friends for. It starts as simple as that. It doesn't have to be this, oh my goodness, we're meeting with this senator from a different country. That's a whole different global thing. But it starts with, A, let's educate ourselves. B, how can you, for those that are interested, whether it be UNICEF, whether it be Global Peace Let's Talk, I'll drop our email here on the link on how they can connect with us and to learn more. But it's really simple. It starts with the desire to make a difference.
Right. My thing is, what I see is that the barriers of fear people have stop them from being able to do the things that they're complaining about. So, for instance, in my town here in Florida, every time a politician runs for office, it seems like the biggest deal is the roads and the potholes. It's like the potholes, the potholes, the potholes.
You're definitely not in Orlando. That's
not in Orlando, right? Closer to the beach. But it's like this is a big deal for people. The roads, right? Yeah. The things that are really important, like we have the river, the Indian River. I mean, it's being completely polluted. We're right near an Air Force base and the Space Center and all that. So we see all of the environmental damage, but the issue is the potholes. So how can people get away from... See, I think that people are going after the potholes because they think it's something that they have control over. And I don't think that they have control over the environment and the policies for the environment, or agriculture, the policies for agriculture, the policies for human trafficking. I think that feels too big for somebody. And so they go after the potholes. What do you think?
Mark?
I'm so happy that this isn't censored here. Absolutely. I hear and I appreciate what you're saying. It's on the journey. I think we all experience the same thing where I want to make a change, but I don't know where to start. I want to help animals, but do I join PETA? Do I join the ASPCA? Do I join the Humane Society? And you kind of sort of get so bogged down in the variety that you have. It's like you have that phenomena that occurs where you have 10,000 channels, but there's nothing to watch. So a big part is just being decisive and just making a decision. It doesn't have to be the perfect decision. At the end of the day, if you choose the ASPCA and you don't like it, you learn something, you contributed, then you can move on to the Humane Society, right? Because you got an education. So education, be decisive and get an education and use it accordingly. And in terms of the pothole, Melody and I say, have the audacity to care about humanity more than you care about yourself. You look at the people who've created the greatest change, people who we admire, who we love, who we try to emulate, like Mother Teresa, a poor little Indian woman from Calcutta who didn't have a whole heck of a lot of money. And yet every single world leader was at her funeral and she died. Why is that? She wasn't worried about the potholes. She wasn't worried about how the potholes inconvenienced her journey. She wasn't worried about how the potholes affected her rims or her suspension or her commute. She had the audacity to care about other people who never even knew she existed, who would never even know she existed, care about them more than she cared about herself. You know, there's something to be said about experiencing compassion. Compassion means I understand, I empathize where you're coming from, and it hurts me to the degree that I'm willing to help you. That's why I'm not an advocate of complaining. Why? Because complaining eases pressure. Why is it that a whole bunch of people can gather together at an event, complain, accomplish nothing, but they feel good at the end of the day?
You like every protest I've ever seen?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just saying, like, every protest I've ever seen, and especially what happened last summer,
Mhm.
right? Especially what happened last summer was letting off the steam. It's a pressure cooker, right? So here's my question to you then. We don't want to let off the steam. We don't want to let off the pressure. What do we do instead of that? Because if we're in a pressure cooker, at some point, the pressure's either going to get too big and it's going to blow up, or we're going to let it off slowly, you know, or we're going to like protest and create some violence and let it out that way. So what is your solution? I know you're an NLP master, so you got to have something.
And we're going to use the pressure cooker analogy. So what happens to anybody who's ever used a pressure cooker if you open the pressure cooker right away? It explodes. Literally, it explodes. But what happens when you take that little nozzle and you just turn it sideways? You have a consistent stream of pressure. I don't believe in keeping everything bottled up. I believe in taking what would have otherwise resulted in an explosion and channeling it into a consistent stream. What that stream looks like, that depends on how much you're willing to care for humanity. That depends on how far you're willing to go to solve a problem. That depends on how resourceful you're willing to be. You know, I know that for myself and for Melody, that obviously, you know, we were in Orlando, and basically during between the months of October and mid-January, we're just heavy. That is when Unicef is in its heaviest humanitarian work. You know, all you got to do is drive around certain parts of your town, and you look at the living conditions of people. That should break your heart, but it should anger you. It should anger you to a point where you don't post on Facebook about it and ease the pressure. You find out how you can actually help. You know, Melody and I were in a trailer park called, oh goodness, what's it called? Happy Oaks, something along
like
those.
that. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the most impoverished trailer parks in Orlando, and you go there and it's like a third world country. I remember vividly the property manager. He manages the 25 or 26 some odd trailers that are there. You would think that he would live in the best trailer in the best home there because he manages everything. This man lives in what looks like a shack, like that was abandoned a long time ago. And not only does he live there, but he lives there with his wife and his 6 or 7 grandchildren. You know, you see something like that, it doesn't matter if you don't know what to do. You buy food, you donate money. You know, it's like that phenomena where I want to make a change. I want to help somebody, but when the homeless person walks by my window when I'm at a traffic light, all of a sudden I'm pretending to text, or I'm pretending to look in my glove compartment or in my center console, or I happen to be looking this way when I know that he's over there. You know, sometimes things are painful,
right?
And it hurts to see certain people's living conditions, and it hurts to recognize what's happening to our children in this world. You know, it's painful to know that child trafficking is human trafficking, $152 billion a year industry, and it's happening right in front of us. It's painful. I got scolded while I was speaking to, shocker, I was speaking to a senator's office. Or was he a senator, Mel?
It was, yeah, congressman.
congressman. Can I say his name?
No.
No. Okay. I was speaking to a
Yeah,
certain congressman's office, and I got scolded because I shared my particular story, my battle with mental health since I was a child. Every label I was given: ADD, ADHD, dyslexic, socially anxious, being epileptic. These are all labels I was given. And then being sexually abused by men and by women as a child. I told this story, right, because we connect via stories. Well, UNICEF attempted to silence me. And the congressman, his office, we got into a bit of a 12-round fight, right? And at the end of the day, just knowing that people like that are in office, people who are willing to disrespect not just the struggle of the individual, right, me, but are willing to hear a bunch of individuals say, we need your help, we need your support, because there are girls right now in Africa being raped on the way to get water that us in America wouldn't let our dogs drink. We need your help. And for that office to turn around and say, you know what? We don't support that, because we need to be helping kids in our borders, because, you know, white children are more special and more worthy of protect than those Black children in Africa. Knowing that people like that exist should light a fire in everybody, in the way that they vote and in the compassion that they're willing to have when they look at children and when they look at that homeless man down the street.
Okay.
You know, I think
So hold on a second. We're shitting on people a whole lot.
Yeah.
Right. So it should do this and it should do that. I get that, but there's a huge population of people who can't see in front of their own shoes, because their own shoes are holy. Their own shoes are tattered and worn, because they're working 2 and 3 jobs and they don't have time to think of anything other than trying to survive. Yeah. Right. So I get that we're shitting on what people should be doing. I think most people these days are in a heightened state of fight or flight. Their nervous system is completely out of whack and not working properly. We're reactive instead of responsive. So we react to triggers versus respond to events and truth and fact, right? So all of these shoulds that we're shitting on people, right? What is it that is going to take us to actually care about us, right, next door? So we have the World Sucks chart, right? The World Sucks chart looks like this. It's me as an individual, right? And then my family, and then my community, and then my county, and then my state, and then my country, and then my, you know, continent, right? It's the World Sucks chart, because most people are stuck in the individual, maybe individual family. In order to get to the world view, where they're literally able to take that bigger picture view, you've got to go through individual trauma and pain and sickness and illness, then family pain and sickness and illness. Then you got to go through city, you know, pain and, you know, illness. I mean, the pain and illness may be the roads, it may be the fraud in the politics, it may be any kind of thing, right? But we got to go through these layers in order to get to the worldview. For most people, just jumping to that worldview is almost impossible. So let's drop it back. Yeah, absolutely. Let's drop it back and step by step it.
Right. So I'm going to start with a question for anybody who's listening, watching, you know, this interview. What is the value of a human life? Whether it's yours, whether it's your child, whether it's your parents, whether it's your neighborhood. Starts with that one question, because you're right. It all starts with us. We're not expecting people to jump on a global scale here. I'm asking you what Mark had alluded to. Are you sensitive to the human suffering that when you see that homeless person on the side corner, what's the first thing that comes into mind? Judgment, because that's what we've been hearing a lot. Oh, that person's not really a homeless. They're pretending to be rich, and they're pretending to be poor, but they actually use this money for something else. Or the labels that we give them. They're alcoholics. They're going to use that money for drugs. Literally, I mean, human nature is to automatically judge the situation. Let me pull it back with saying what Mark said: compassion.
Compassion over condemnation.
Right. What if we change that perspective and story? Could you literally spare 50 cents or $1? Or just even ask for their name. Mark does something beautifully that I haven't seen in the humanitarian space a lot, which is as simple as an act of kindness, that when we're doing our humanitarian impact, is to ask for that person's name that we're serving. What's their story? A lot of this homeless folks in the Orlando area, surprisingly, are what? Veterans. People who served our own country. Most of the time, they're not even looking for the $1 or 50. It's really interesting. Sometimes they just want to be listened to. And the act of compassion is free. So I'm going to scale it back to start with that. So you pointed out a really good picture there, Ari. We live in a world that is reactive versus proactive. We live in a world that are judgmental versus compassion. So if we look at this behavioral modification of just retelling it from a different focus, what if you were that person in that person's shoes right now? Wouldn't you want somebody kind to at least lend an ear, or maybe 5 minutes of your time? It starts with that, and it's free. It's really free when you look at it.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you bringing it back down. I just, like I said, I don't want to shame people, because frankly, like, people have been told their entire lives, right? Let's go to weight. They've been told their entire lives that they're fat because of their particular habits, their particular kind of eating, their particular way. Most of those people were never told that eating a low-fat, high-carb diet was going to make them more fat, right? They weren't told. They were told the opposite. And so I think most people, they're not at fault. They're not at fault for the chemicals that have been put into their food, right? They're not at fault for the policies that have allowed poison to come into play, right? They're not like Nestle having a contract with the state of California to take out the water for like 70 cents like per million gallons since the 1970s, and having that negotiation never, be renewed, and letting Nestle take that water allowed the fires, the droughts, the temperature changes, the amount of water not in that state is directly because of bottling, right? We can kind of target these things. We know this. Yet the people are being told that they're responsible, that they need to make the changes. I think that the changes need to come from the people to the politicians, right? So the politicians, but how do they even know? How does Joe Schmo, like I was at a Walmart and I asked for the grass-fed meat, and the guy in the butcher department didn't even know what I was talking about. Like, he didn't know what grass-fed meat meant. Yeah. So we think, the people who think that we know, and who study this stuff, who know all kinds of information about it, right? We think that everybody should know the same information we know. But most people haven't a clue about proper nutrition, about proper health, about proper, weight. Not even most doctors know about how to create a lifestyle of health. And so we stop blaming. I stop blaming. I let people off the hook. It's not your fault. Now that you know that, right? What are you going to do about it? But at first, it's not your fault. You have been deceived, right? So for people who are wanting to change the world, right, and step up and step out of that comfort zone, what do you think that they need mentally to get to the point where they could even think about something outside of I'm surviving?
So I'll start with a couple, and then I'll turn it over to my trusted co-everything here. It starts with, what is truth? Not my version of truth or your version of truth. What is true at this given moment? Right? It starts with an education, just like you said. The butcher didn't even know what grass-fed cow is, but we assume he should know because that's his part of his profession as a butcher, but they don't, right? So what is true? What is true in that picture is there's a disconnect about our assumption, our expectation, and their learning, right? Number two, did we judge them that they should know this? You know, you were talking about the shoulds that you were throwing. So the second question is asking that question, why don't you know this? Then you're going to discover this whole mountain of, well, we're no longer trained. We just expect people to read labels, right? Unlike the butchers in the olden days. So what is true in the current situation? Let's start with that. Suspending all judgments, right? Suspending all the expectations. What is true? Not my truth, not Ari's truth, not Mark's truth, but the factual statement at the moment, right? Because like you said, we saw those protests, we saw the marches, we saw the everything, the whole world was watching everything that was happening last year. But yet there were the silent people in action that are moving. You gave birth, lack of a better term, Ari, to a podcast that wanted to highlight the people that are making a difference of changing the world for better tomorrow.
Right.
That came out of a desire to make a difference for yourself. Right, and find like-minded people that are doing these very things that we're talking about right now, instead of complaining about those things. That's a start, right? Wouldn't it be beautiful if people actually had a gathering of solutions-driven thinking versus complaining?
That's what I've been developing, is
Right?
Solution Summit.
So imagine if it starts with two people, because that's what started with myself and Mark, and then it just grew in teams. But it has to start somewhere. So why not start with yourself and just grab one person,
Right.
and then ignite that fire?
Here's the thing. I have an entrepreneur spirit.
Mhm.
I am absolutely not risk adverse. Risk is like my life, right? I don't remember a time in my life where I've felt safe, I've felt comfortable, I've felt, any of those things settled that most people feel in life. Okay, so I recognize my personality. I'm not gonna settle for anything ever. I can't. I don't know how. It's not in my DNA. That is not most people. And so I recognize that in me, I am this type of person who will not ever settle, who will not ever see the world as something that's done, something that's finished, something that doesn't need fixing or doesn't need optimizing. I've actually taken the judgments out. I go, is that system optimized or is it sub-optimized? If it's sub-optimized, how can we optimize it and make it more optimum, right? Take out the judgments completely. But I recognize that about my personality. I don't know your personality. I don't know your personality, right? I would imagine that the fact that you've done what you've done means that you have a fair amount of risk, to safety ratio, where you prefer a little bit more risk than safety, right? Because it is very risky to do what you're doing. And for you to go off and do that requires a certain personality type. So here's my thing. For the people who are not that personality, who do not have an entrepreneur spirit, who are born to be in the assembly line, they're trained from birth to be this cog in the assembly line. I do this, it goes down the line, the other person does that, right? The other person does this, and then that whole product is done, but I'm not the master. I'm not the guy who's going to cobble that shoe and make every single piece of it perfect. Got it? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's personality type for mastery, and there's a personality type for an assembly line. So the question becomes, how do we get the entrepreneurs who are moving things forward, instead of the 1% that tends to keep things stalled, right? How do we get the people who are moving things forward to then activate the assembly line to create the assembly of what needs to happen? We have the visionaries. I get it. You're a visionary. You're a visionary, Mark. You're a visionary, Melody. I get that. So how do you move the people who are not visionaries into your way of being, thinking, or at least acting?
Mark, you go first.
That's a really, really good question. I thoroughly enjoyed that. When you're looking at, like you said, the visionary and the assembly line, I think that self-awareness is a priceless gift. A lot of people who should be in the assembly line want to be leaders, want to be leading the pack. And that's gonna cause chaos and calamity on its best day. And a lot of people that should be leading the pack have allowed themselves to be convinced by their own volition or by other people that they belong in the assembly line. So I think there's something to be said about knowing who you are and honoring that truth, honoring the truth of that, and being where you belong. You know, you have gifts and talents that I could never dream of having. So does Mel, and vice versa. So I think that it's critically important because everything starts at leadership. Everything starts at leadership. Just like with families, how well your family does is a product of the leadership in the household. So I think that there's an expression that I love, that the majority of people are going to defer to the highest resonance in the room. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's critically important that we bring in compassion and selflessness to leaders, which is difficult, right? Because we live in a world that glorifies selfishness. And if leadership at the top is entirely self-focused and self-involved, we're not going to really get anywhere, because you're not doing your job as a leader. At the end of the day, leaders are supposed to produce a result, absolutely, but it's your job to inspire and to teach. And based on what your goals are and based on what drives you, what makes you get up out of the bed, is it for you to leave a legacy? Is it for you to become rich and well-known, powerful? Is it for you to make sure that, you know, one homeless person was seen that day and felt heard? I think flipping that script and flipping that switch from self-focus to just compassionate and not self-sacrificing in a negative way, but like we said, being willing to do for others what the vast majority of people aren't willing to do. And I mean, there's only so many ways I can say compassion, stop, stop being selfish, compassion.
Right. So where does the whole concept of, put the mask on your face before you put it on your kid's face come in?
Well, it starts with the self. You have to make sure that we talked about self-awareness, but you need to figure out what's wrong with you first. If you are a leader and you want to make a positive impact, you need to figure out what your shortcomings are. You need to deal with your own trauma. You need to open those doors that you worked tirelessly to bolt shut. You can't have compassion for other people if you are holding yourself to an immeasurable standard and you're constantly criticizing and condemning. And it's almost like penance. If you've seen that movie with Tom Hanks, what's that movie? The prequel to Angels and Demons, the Da Vinci Code. There's this, remember the guy that was constantly whipping himself?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Leaders do that to themselves all the time. If you're constantly in a state of war with yourself or whatever the case, you're not going to be in a state of peace or compassion with other people. So that whole concept of putting your mask on first, I do believe that you can only help and bless other people to the capacity that you're able to do it for yourself. But once you've got yourself figured out, evolution, right, dictates that we don't just stay there, because if we just stay there in the self, we've become stagnant. And ultimately, you know, how much of this mental health crisis is just a product of, I'm going to say, inadvertent narcissism. It's just a product of inadvertent focus. You know, when you are this, there's 8 billion people, well, 7.9 something, but there's almost 8 billion people on the planet. It's a big world. And if everything just revolves around us, we're a pretty insignificant presence when compared to everything and everybody, even when compared to those people at a town hall meeting, you know? So I think that once you've got the self figured out, once you've brought in compassion and understanding and a little bit of grace, it's only natural to extend it outward. How far is up to your discretion. It can stay within your family, your community.
So NLP, man, how does somebody start the process of figuring out who they are when they've never even heard that concept of, I know who I am. I like to drink my beer. I like to watch my TV and my football. I know who I am. I know who I am. I like to study and read books, and you know, I know who I am.
I like how the voice changed for those two individuals.
Well, you know, we have stereotypes, right? We have stereotypes. What are the stereotypes? Stereotypes are simple. You don't want somebody who's, you know, as your neurosurgeon cutting in your head saying, now here's what we got to do. We got to cut your head right open right there. Okay? You don't want that. You may want that tremendously. It might be an awesome thing, but you'd rather say, you know, here's what we got to do. We're going to cut a hole in your head and we're going to put a cord, a light, universal knowledge. You know, you want to hear, it's totally different. We have stereotypes, most of them for a reason, which is kind of odd. But the stereotype that I'm putting out here is most people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know themselves because nobody's ever told them to investigate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody even says, what do you want to be when you grow up anymore? It's more like, how do you want to make money?
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that's the question. You know, we want to help people activate their vision for a better world. We want to help create a new tomorrow today. People need to have skills and tools to do that, right?
Yeah.
So we already know, like, if they wanted to be part of Global Peace Let's Talk, they could contact you. But they may not know that they could do that here or here, right? You may have told them that, but they may not felt like that was an invitation for them. So how do you get them to feel like this is an invitation for you? NLP might do that, but you know, let's kind of talk a little bit about that. How does one feel like the invitation is for them to start moving and start doing and start feeling? And
I'm gonna let you take that away, Mom. I want to see what Steve Maraboli would think about this.
Like, let me take a step back here, Ari. Prior to my entrepreneurship adventure of roller coaster of what the heck am I doing, right? And the three of us can relate to that. I was in corporate management for 2 decades. So I'm very familiar with this assembly line. Huh?
Since you were 2 years old?
No, 2, yeah, sure, yes. Thank you for that, but yes. I wasn't sure if this is an audio or video or both type of podcast, but I get that all the time. Yeah, since I was 2 years old, for the sake of your listeners. No, but basically, you know, and I had a lot of those people that were just following you give them a duty, check, you know, and they're happy. They're happy with that. They're content. But this is the truth that everybody comes through. What they do with it is a whole different matter. There's one question that ultimately shows up. I've seen this in annual reviews, performance reviews, because I mean, a lot of these people are like, oh, am I going to get a raise this year for the 12 months that I've done my checkbox, right? And then it sucks, completely sucks when you're being rated from 1 to 5, you fall on the average, right? Eventually, that's what led me out into this adventurous world. But here's the one question that's always showing up. There has to be more to life than this. It has to be. That's why even in assembly lines, they look for promotions. They look for those merit badges. There's a competition, sense of competition that happens within a corporate life, so we can make people feel valued. That's the word. What is your value? Right? People want to be contributors even in assembly lines. If not, then people will be happy with minimum wages and not want to have goals or any of that in life. But again, it's that label of you're an assembly line. Well, if you drum that enough, that's how they're exactly going to perform. But if we start with, there has to be more to life than this. You weren't born to live in a box. Tony Robbins says this. You weren't born to live in a box, to drive a box, to work in a box, to type in a box, to drive back in a box, sit in a box, turn on a box, and then go to sleep still watching a box. It's not a box life. But somehow people have decided they were going to put you inside the box, right? But yet, even in assembly lines, there's hierarchy, there's promotion, because people want to constantly prove to others they're better than when they started or how they started. So think about that. What is the value of human life? There has to be more to life than that. So if we were to bridge out all the learnings in the last hour that we've been talking, right? Whether it be NLP, PNA, and in my case, in Mark's case, we say GOD, right? In the middle of everything that we handle. And Ari, with your learnings, we don't start to remain stagnant. So even those people that are watching television shows, somewhere in their history line, I love asking that question. What is the deepest adversity that became a catalyst to your purpose? What is the deepest adversity that became a catalyst to your purpose?
So you asked that of normal people sitting on the couch watching TV.
Absolutely. And you know what? The
What
quality
words are that coming out of your mouth?
Yeah, the quality of your questions determines the response and the focus that conversation is going to have. See, people that you pointed at, people that comes together in a crowd to complain. Someone was leading that complaint, someone festered that complaint, and someone ended it with a complaint. But what if you're that one person, regardless if you're just a clerical startup, I don't even know what the minimum wage is at this point, and just ask that quality question. Mm-hmm. What can you do to make a difference in this world? What is the deepest adversity that became a catalyst to your purpose? Do you even know what your purpose is? Or even as simple as this, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a child? Because somehow along the way, we all wanted to be some kind of doctor, superhero, actor, something, right? It starts as simple as that. It's a fun question. So I'm going to ask you that, for example, Ari, when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Veterinarian.
Okay. And why did you want to be a veterinarian?
Loved animals, liked medicine. I had a friend whose dad was a veterinarian, so I spent like my ninth year in life this summer working for the veterinarian and helping with surgeries and stuff and doing all the things that a veterinarian assistant would do, but that was why.
So what was the fondest memory of you doing that job?
I'm not sure I had a fond memory of it. It was pretty gruesome to watch, but I enjoyed doing stuff. I always wanted to be doing things that were productive. My parents had Amway in the garage. So we have boxes of Amway, LOC, Sweet Shot, masks, we had all that stuff. So for me, I grew up with entrepreneurs, entrepreneur parents. Everything was what hustle can we try to get? And so that's how I perceive everything in my life. I was also a martial artist, gymnast, baseball player. I did a lot of sports, long distance cycling. And so I was always very active and very using my own creative energy. I also wasn't a fan of people very much. Most people didn't like me. I had been raped and molested, and I was, basically treated like, because I was Jewish, I was treated like I killed Jesus personally. And so therefore I shouldn't be alive. I mean, there's my history is very specific to the person that I've become.
Yeah.
Right? I wouldn't wish my experiences on anybody, and I know that those experiences were uniquely directed at me.
Yeah.
So that I could be who I am. But that is a lot of self-awareness that comes from, I went to EST when I was 8. I did LifeSpring and Landmark and the Forum and PsyWorld and CEO Space and IBI. I mean, I've been in the world of self-development alongside being in the world of being traumatized my entire life. So it's like side by side, went hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I assume nothing when it comes to other people and how they grew up and what their thinking is. I assume nothing. I only can ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
because the truth is that no matter how much I think I know what's in somebody else's head, I never have and I never will, because most people don't even know what's in their own heads.
But do you see what just happened here? I would not have discovered that unless I asked you those questions. And here's the truth of the matter here. Yes, stories tie humanity together, but so does adversity and suffering, because none of us is spared from that as we go through life. It comes in different forms. You and Mark were very transparent with your abuses, that came painfully. And the reasons why you're both advocates in different forms is because of those traumas. You went through personal development because you were trying to heal and find answers from those traumas. And I can almost bet you with accuracy, everybody that you come across, whether it's the guy that's watching TV because that's what brings him joy at the moment, right? At the moment, has gone through some deep suffering themselves, because that is unfortunately the one thing we can't avoid in life, from childhood to adulthood. But there's also this humanity that is, there's a part of humanity that is true, regardless of what background you come from, is the desire to be good, the desire to be accepted, the desire to be loved. That is something that there is desire to be needed and desire to be part of something beautiful. If
I
you can
just want to know how you know that that's part of everybody's belief, because I've met people that isn't even close to what they believe.
It's not so much as the belief, it's how you deliver that question. Something happens in their childhood.
No, I understand that. I'll give you an example. I used to do, we used to do sweat lodges in the prison system in California. So we'd go into California Youth Authority with a bunch of gangs, people who thought that they were really tough, and we'd get them into a sweat lodge, native ceremony, and what we consider the stones, the grandfathers, the ancestors. Gangbanger might think that they're tough. They're not tougher than 100 something degree temperature sitting, in a womb, dark, with some stones, sweating their pants off, right? And so we could cleanse out and shift behavior, right, from that. And I had somebody who had come to, once they had gotten out of prison, had come to the sweat lodges and said one night, "You saved somebody's life tonight." And what are you talking about? I was about to go retaliate and kill somebody, and I came here instead. Right? So that's somebody being, in my opinion, having that belief like you were talking about. There's other people who are in that system. Not only would they never have even thought about it, they would never have considered not killing that person. It wouldn't have even been a thought in their head, maybe I shouldn't do this, right? So here's the thing. Yes, the history of that person is going to be directly involved in where they're at now. And I don't believe in evil. I believe in optimum and suboptimum, right? So the state of affairs that they're in is suboptimal mental state, right? In order to get that person to a cleaner mental state, would take probably a massive act of tools, concentrated act of tools. But I've never seen that person or those people who are in that position in the moment calm themselves enough to be in a place where you're talking about them being.
Yeah, well, it's not in that moment, but sometimes one question would ignite that spark, as simple as what happened? What happened to you, or what happened opens up a doorway of discoveries, right? Should they choose to stay there, that's their choice. I'm not trying to save that person when there's nations waiting for us to step up. But here's what's true. Every day we delay, more people suffer. Every day that we decide to not do something about, there's another crowd rising that complains about. Well, I don't want to be on the second or the latter crowd. The three of us certainly don't. That's why we're having this conversation this afternoon.
Yes.
Right? So it's just something as simple as, it goes back to that, what happened, the simple questions. It goes back to the word that Mark said, compassion. It goes back to you, the audacity to say what is true, uncensored. Right? Whether you be in an assembly line, whether you be a CEO or a high-risk entrepreneur. Find out what is that link that connects to that, to the ability to, or desire to want to do something. I am not going to condemn you if you're the person that decides, no, my happiness is watching that box because I've done my time, right? It's very interesting, but then what can I learn from you during the time that you were doing that time, so that I can gain wisdoms or lessons, one or the two, but I'm going to gain something from somebody all the time. What I do with that, that's my choice and prerogative.
Mm.
Mark, he ends this with a grunt.
I had to drop that low baritone. You know, you're, in my opinion anyway, for whatever it's worth, you're absolutely correct in that regard. We're students and teachers at the end of the day, but part of having that compassion awakened inside of you is, it's just that, not judging and not condemning because you don't know. There's an expression that I absolutely love, which says, if you were to spend 10 minutes alone with your greatest enemy, you'd realize that you have way more in common with them than you thought. Because as different as we all are, there are certain intrinsic, inherent needs that we all have. As different as we all are in the multitude of ways, we all cry when we're sad. We all, bunch up our fists and do that when we get upset. We laugh when we're happy, and we have people that we love, and we want to love and be loved. Despite how incongruent our actions might be at the moment, everything is for the pursuit of that. Now, our vehicles might be different, but the intention is that. And I think that part of leading with compassion is, again, asking those questions, is learning to recognize suffering where it's apparent and it's not being addressed, but also suffering where it's silent and it's being cleverly disguised, with a smile or with jokes and with an eccentric personality like Robin Williams. And at the end of the day, it's learning to ask those penetrating questions, because it's in that moment, right, where you have the gift of allowing somebody the opportunity to contemplate themselves, their situation, and their life in a manner that completely goes against what they were taught and what they experienced growing up. And it's in that little moment, and it's in that little spark where healing can take place. Now, will it take place? That's up to the person, but you create those pockets of opportunity for goodness to flow.
Right. Creating the space. So I admit I've been playing devil's advocate a bunch today, because I like to kind of this up. But I have a buddy who is a compassionate communications guy,
Mhm.
and he actually went to prison at some point in his life and ended up having to really utilize those compassionate communication skills, and ended up basically being like the prison counselor for
Mm.
the time that he was in. I mean,
Talk about rubber meeting the road, huh?
yeah, exactly. He had to put those skills to test, the NLP, the compassionate communication, the nonviolent communication, all of that together in one, you know, and he had a lot of people who had thanked him because they were about to do something, right? And so I want to say I'm a devil's advocate because there are people who have never heard of things before. They're experiencing everything new, in the world of self-help. They may have been in a box of religion. They may have been in a box of belief, in a box of monetary, constriction, whatever that is. And so I play that devil's advocate because I want to draw out the juice from you guys, so that the people who are not used to that way of thinking, this is what I call critical thinking, common sense, but it's minutia thinking. It's the deep down little pieces of information that make the biggest bits of difference. And to your point, silence is a bully's best friend. That's a saying that I've had for a long time. So it's time to get loud. That's for the systems that we find ourselves under, these systems that are constrictive and really just optimized. They're sub-optimized so badly that they are almost broken, like healthcare system, the results. I mean, if you just look at results, right? And so within that system, to me, there's a simple solution. And that simple solution is a one-word solution that changes everything. And I think that it fits for all things. It's the incentive. And the incentives that we give, that one word. So let's say we took the incentives in healthcare and we changed it from doing procedures, like you don't get paid anymore for doing more stuff. You only get paid for the result. So the more people that become healthy, the more money you get paid. At the end of the day, the people who are going to be getting paid the most are going to be doing the least amount of work because they're going to have people healthy. Yeah. So you get 10 people to quit smoking, cool, you get a bonus, right? So we incentivize differently. So if we change the incentives from results or to results from procedures, right? The entire system has to reorganize itself in order to fit in with that incentive, right? So if the incentives are the answer to that, let's look at the incentives to what Global Peace Let's Talk Now is doing. Let's look at the incentives, for that so that people can kind of get, here's the incentive for us to do this. Anybody?
Yes.
I completely agree. But that's those are those brilliant little practical psychology tools that we need more of in every area of life. I think so much of life, right, revolves around these two words, leverage and incentive. If you've got those two things, game changes.
Absolutely.
So you were asking a question, Ari, of what are the incentives to be joining Global Peace Let's Talk, for an example, right?
Oh, the incentive. What is it that you're doing? The incentive to do what you're doing. So what is the incentives for you as a company? Like,
all right.
What is it you get?
So here's one thing that I will champion for myself. Because the company or the organization or nonprofit, I should say, NGO, is such at a baby stage with massive explosive growth, I have the privilege of putting the right structures, policies, and processes that actually impacts humanity at a scale that helps end suffering, Not all of it, but most of it. Now, a personal incentive for me is that I do have two sons. I mentioned this to you before. Is that at least they know that one day when I'm just a fleeting memory, their mom did something to make the world that they live in a better place for them. I hope that there's a kind soul, another one of me out there, that can share the same compassion to my kids long after I'm gone, or their kids at that point, right? Because it becomes a generational blessing, for lack of a better term, a generational move forward, a generational element at this point. You know, I have a lot of accolades. Mark is very well aware of this. One of them was the biggest one last year, which is the TOPA Award, which basically recognizes one of the top 10 out of 4.1 million Filipino Americans living in the United States. I was one of those top 10, right? Out of 4.1 million. Outside that, they did a decade tribute, which is to be the top 100 out of, gosh, millions of Filipino Americans between the Philippines and the USA. I was there with massive names. Bruno Mars, then the co-founder of Snapchat, you know, politicians, you name it, have reached that without looking for accolades along the way. That's a legacy that I leave with my children, right? It's better than saying, oh, I'm on a best, you know, I'm on the Amazon bestseller, which is literally algorithms that you can manipulate. Let's face the truth on these things, right? But to have attained that level, so I can leave it to them and say, I had the audacity to defy what everybody else said was impossible. That is my incentive, so that I can teach them the values that you are not the labels people will give you, what the, you know, environment, culture, religion, expectations, you name it, because that's something your mom had to overcome herself. Right? Let me show you the tools that you are not the labels that people have given you or expectations, and that the value of who you are is found more than the dollar amount that may be in your bank account in the future or even in the present. Because by starting with those very critical values that are so not being taught now, Ari, whether it's in the educational system or the home front, are the very values that's needed, to your point, to live, you know, to change the world. Yep. So that's the incentive for me with anything that has to do internally, personally, with my, you know, with me, but more so having the platform that Mark and I does, and actually doing this on a global scale. A simple little thing like, hey, how can I help, starts the whole ball process, really. How can be a part of this?
Cool beans. Thank you. And Mark?
I think that, you know, I haven't been blessed with children as of yet. So I can't say that I want to leave a legacy for my children. But what I can say is that for every child who was ever negatively labeled, who was ever sexually abused, who was ever told that they would never amount to anything, whoever found themselves moments away from taking their own life, who in every capacity was told that they were not worth it and that they were less than. My incentive is that my journey can serve as a legacy of what is possible and how whatever it is that you believe in has the power to turn a travesty into a beautiful testimony. You know, my greatest incentive at the end of the day, and I'm like you, I'm not religious either. I haven't mentioned any religion. But my greatest source of joy and inspiration, and my greatest hope, is that at the end of my life, my creator can look at me and said, you did good. You did everything I asked you to. You know, I want to leave this earth with not a single bit of compassion in me, not a single bit of love, not a single bit of wisdom, and not a single bit of caring, because I left it all on the table. I left it all on the table, and hopefully, somebody learned from my life and took those tools and took those experiences and was able to replicate it and make somebody else's life better. That's my incentive.
And I'm going to round it with this, Ari, because Mark and I resonate with this quote, whether you believe in God or not, right? Religion or not, or whatever you want to call this. But there's a quote that I fell in love with many, many years ago that I live by. And this is not in the Bible. That's a whole different conversation. We can go on for 3 hours. But it's by Emma Bombeck that literally rounds up what Mark said beautifully, that goes, when I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have a bit of single talent left and could say, I used everything you gave me.
Awesome sauce. Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll
Thank
have
you for having us.
Yeah, we'll have links and things in the description when we air the show. So it'll all be down there or over there, whichever way it goes.
Awesomeness is everywhere.
Awesomeness is everywhere. And so thank you so much for being here. And remember, everybody, we're creating a new tomorrow today. We're activating our vision for a better world now. What can you do? Won't cost you a dime today, tomorrow, the next day to create a new tomorrow for yourself today. Thanks for coming.